Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 110. Whoa. For Monday, October 12th, 2020, my name is Joel Duggan, and joining me, as always, is my friend Jonny, but you may know him better as the Netherite Pixel 4000. Hello, sir.
The Netherite Pixel 4000 is what I will end up calling my computer one of these days, I expect. It does sound a little bit more technological advanced than me having blown up half of the Nether in search of this stuff, which we'll talk about in a second. What we've been talking about so far, though, in the render distance, the pre-show conversation you can listen to if you are a patron of our podcast, is computer setups, is blustery weather, and all kinds of things in between. You can get that at patreon.com/thespawnchunks if you join up to be a patron. Any tier of access gets you access to the render distance via the Patreon RSS feed. So, Joel, what have you been up to in Minecraft this week? We're kind of on the come down from the Minecraft live experience, but I'm sure the gears are now turning in various people's heads and inspiration is drifting back into Minecraft. So what's new with you?
I didn't get a lot done because on the tail of the Minecraft Live coverage, the Minecraft Live episode we did, plus my own podcasting and the admin stuff that happens at the beginning of the month, I just didn't have a lot of time to play anything during the week. However, I did have a really chill time working on the roads in the player arrival area in the medieval fantasy realm on the server. And it was good because the planning part had already been done. I had mapped out the path of the road, but what was not done was the texturing. I had just temporarily put coarse dirt down and just was say, I'll come back to this later. And so this weekend was me finishing up the textures, and I really got a lot out of it. It was a little bit different. I tried to just not do what I've done before. I tried to add in some like muddy patches, using some acacia, some gravel, which I neglect as a cool road texture for like broken down stone.
Yeah.
And the idea was to try and pepper it so that I was spending all this time in an attention to detail, but that the idea was that you're not going to notice the detail when you walk over it. Like I kind of wanted it to be just like, you're just not going to notice it when you're walking over it. And I think it worked out pretty well. Fun trick I also like to use because I find a frustrating part of doing road textures in Minecraft is that they don't have a geometric edge. Right? You usually, unless you raise the road on purpose, if you're doing a road that's supposed to be kind of flat with the ground, it can be very, very flat. And it just feels very kind of day one Minecraft. So one of the tricks that I like to use is just throwing in a stair block every once in a while along the edge of it to just kind of make it feel like it actually has a geometric, model edge to it.
Yeah.
And then lastly, the just how much you can add to a road by putting a couple of fences in a bush, a strategically placed tree. And it wasn't a custom tree. I just kind of like grew a couple of trees in Minecraft natively until I got the one that I wanted, and added a root to it. Like just little things like that, just enough to kind of guide the player to like have their gaze turned to the right. So all the things are on the left-hand side of the road. And so it kind of makes you look at them, but then steer your character towards the right, which gets you to look at the bridge, which is where I want you to go. So I'm just trying to have that kind of like level design, game design mentality when I do this kind of stuff. And it worked out really well, and it was fun. The thing that I do forget about this is like, texturing the road and doing the trees and the bushes and stuff. It was like a 3-hour stream.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm slow anyway, but it really did take that long.
Yeah, the trial and error process of doing stuff like that and just kind of taking out one block here and there just to kind of swap things around and see how it looks does take much longer than you ever expect. And it's been one of the pitfalls of doing a long-term series like the one I have, where if I get stuck into building, I will, while away 3 or 4 hours and then realize, wait a second, I haven't been doing any of this for like a tutorial or anything like that. So it's, it certainly takes a long time, but streams are good for that. I feel like streams are good for like the busy work side of things. And this definitely looks like it's coming together pretty well. I like the stair detail as well. It sort of implies like maybe there's like a little bit of a drainage ditch sort of thing off to one side, or gutters, just to kind of let the water run away from the road a little bit. And it sort of, implies that slightly cambered road where it's, if you look at roads in the real world, they are, they're not entirely flat most of the time. Like they are ever so slightly curved so that the water will run off to the sides and into drains. And so that's what you end up getting the illusion of when you start adding in stairs like that. So it works. It makes a lot of sense.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I had a lot of fun doing it, and that's the thing with doing it live, like you said on stream. You can kind of take your time. It was really cool having some suggestions from people, and we were talking about like where I was trying to put the wear pattern, and somebody was suggesting that the wear pattern should have been more down the middle, and I was thinking like, well, actually, I want it to be considered a two-way like road, so I wanted it to have wear patterns on the left and the right, not just straight down the middle. So it felt either like wagon tracks or, something like that. So it just looked like it had, traffic on it.
Yeah.
I'm not happy with the lamp posts. There's really not much you can do with the current Minecraft blocks for medieval lampposts. I get frustrated with like certain sub blocks not connecting to other sub blocks, and so the way that I wanted to do it wasn't really going to work with like fence gates and things, because you can't hang lanterns from fence gates, only fence posts. And so it just starts to look a little bit too odd. But I'm looking forward to doing more roads in more developed cities and towns where I don't have to have like grassy patches on the side. Like we can actually do, maybe even on purpose, do like stair gutters and things like that, which would be really, really cool. I really enjoyed some of the conversation in the chat about keeping organized, because people were just like, God, I wish I was as organized as you in your Ender chest. And so I used the Shulker Box tooltip mod that I have installed, which just lets you peek inside shulker boxes, to do a quick little, not so much a tutorial, but just like a quick little share on how I have my ender chest organized and what's in every box. And I've got some duplicates, and it's more about like, well, this landscape box, yes, it's got logs and dirt and grass and stuff in it with some other stuff, but it's just that's the one box you can take out when you need to do a quick little bit of landscaping. And it was fun to kind of communicate that and give people ideas, and hear about what other people had in their ender chests in the chat. So that was fun too.
Mm-hmm.
What have you been up to?
I'll tell you what's in my ender chest right now. It's a shulker box that is 2/3 full of netherite ingots. My ancient debris count for the netherite beacon project has just hit 4,000. I did 2 streams yesterday, actually, one in the morning and one in the evening, just to cover my usual time slot, because that's when a friend was going to be visiting. And so, yeah, I ended up gathering nearly 4 or 5 stacks yesterday of ancient debris itself, and then smelting all of that down into netherite. You realize how little you've actually got, but that's still like, 4 stacks of debris is a stack of netherite ingots, which amounts to all of about 5 blocks of netherite. So still a long way to go, but we are on the downhill at this point, and it's definitely feeling like the end is in sight, which is fun. And just seeing the sheer amount of it in one place is pretty great.
Don't lose that shulker box.
Somebody on Twitter was joking around about like, oh, did you know that if you throw a shulker box with netherite into lava or fire or whatever, it doesn't burn? And I am smart enough, of course, to understand that's not how it works. But that led to Sliced Lime replying to that with a bug report from the Mojang bug tracker, which actually has that listed as a bug. And so, from what I understand, maybe a solution to that could be, if you chuck a shulker box into fire and it's got netherite items or ingots or something in it, then the shulker box can be destroyed, but it drops the netherite items out of it in the same way that it would if you break a standard chest. So it's not going to be like, it can't be exploited in the way that if you put a netherite ingot in every shulker box, then all of your shulker boxes are now fireproof, right? But it could be that, the shulker box itself disappears, but out pop the items that are fireproof, and that's how you preserve that stuff. They are apparently treating that as a bug that has a solution in the works, so we will see. Some people are saying 116.4 is one of the items on our news a little bit later, and that might end up being a fix that arrives in that, but as of yet I don't think it has been actively worked on. It's just been noted as a bug that needs fixing at some stage. Outside of that, I have been attempting to reproduce a lush cave in Minecraft 1.16 because, we were both very enthusiastic about the lush cave in the last episode and on the live stream when Minecraft Live was happening, and I was really taken by the aesthetic of them. Obviously, having that kind of lush green color underground is quite desirable, and it's certainly not the first time that people have tried to, coat a cave with plant life and make it a little bit more kind of overgrown. But I decided to give that a try with the blocks and stuff that we have in 1.16. And so instead of spore blossoms, I'm using pink glazed terracotta because it has that kind of floral petal kind of pattern on it.
Yes,
I was using one of those to represent a spore blossom and just kind of surrounding it with trapdoors to look like the petals of a plant. I can't really do anything about there being particles in the air and stuff, but I was messing around with using green wool and green concrete powder instead of the moss, and having green wool carpet instead of the moss carpet, and just working in a few details of it here and there to add to the museum exhibit that's all about plants and flowers, because I wanted to still tie it into some progress on this museum project, especially now I'm reconsidering whether I'm going to keep this world around when 1.17 actually comes out, because it's going to make a lot more sense to restart a lot of worlds when 1.17 actually arrives because of all of the new terrain generation and whatnot. So I'm thinking this museum needs to get finished, but let me try and sneak in a couple of references to the Caves and Cliffs update before that. And I'm quite happy with it, actually. I will put a picture of that in our Discord show chat, but it's also the survival guide episode for today. And yeah, I was pretty happy with the way that all came together.
I saw the thumbnail, which I think is maybe this image as well, this morning. I didn't have a chance to watch it yet, but yeah, no, that it especially with the ferns, like the two high ferns, like it really starts to feel.
It evokes the mood, at least, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
And you can work in little grass blocks here and there to put the actual plants on, because it seems like the moss carpet is going to be something that grass and other plants can still grow out of. But yeah, I thought, the one thing I think that was really difficult to reproduce was the vines that have glowberries on, because we don't really have anything like that is still green right now. So I was just using oak leaves and jungle leaves for that. But you couldn't get the same glowing effect, so I was trying to conceal torches here and there, hiding a little bit of lighting, that kind of stuff. It's not looking too bad, though. We've got a little bit of bamboo in there as well. And all in all, it just generates the same sort of feeling. And it's going to look so much better once we actually have the real thing. But I thought it was nice as a kind of biome simulator, as it were, in the museum.
Cool. Moving into the news, do you want to split this up? Maybe you can take the tweets and whatnot, and I'll come up with the mob vote stuff.
Yeah, in the wake of Minecraft Live, we actually have a few clarifications and extra stuff from the Minecraft team. Just clarifying a few features and things that people had a couple of questions over that they could answer immediately that just wasn't addressed in the main show. But first of all, Adrian Ostergaard on Twitter, all of the links to these will be in our show notes on thespawnchunks.com. Adrian Ostergaard has confirmed that Minecraft 1.16.4 is on its way, saying, I assume all of you are curious as to when the 1.17 snapshots will begin, but before we start releasing those snapshots, we plan to release 1.16.4. This will be a small update that does not contain any gameplay features, so pretty much just bug fixes and tweaks here and there. Outside of that, Lady Agnes tweeted a couple of things, including looking for feedback on features of the Caves and Cliffs update. In particular, copper has been Lady Agnes's focus, saying that they were seeing questions about if you can make copper stay in a certain state, and yes, you can. So if you really want a copper block to be copper orange or semi-green forever, then there will be a way to achieve that. She also asked people to give a bit of feedback on how long they think the oxidation process should take, saying we really want it to take a long time for copper to oxidize in Minecraft. I'm curious, approximately how many Minecraft days do you think there should be between each oxidation state of the copper block, which seems like there are 2 or 3 of those before it turns that full verdigris green. Last of all, King B-Dogs confirmed on Twitter that Skulk sensors will not be triggered by rain, the warden, or each other. And this was an interesting clarification, because in the live show, I kind of thought that the Skulk sensors producing sound meant that they could kind of bounce the sound back and forth. But a couple of tweets from King B-Dogs here, which I'll read in sequence. We made the design decision for Skulk sensors to not be affected by ambient weather like rain. My logic for this is habituation, where the Skulk sensor essentially becomes used to the constant stimulus, no longer registering it as a vibration. I think this could be a really unfun mechanic if rain can suddenly mess up your redstone contraptions. This is also why Skulk sensors don't react to each other or the warden, since they're so accustomed to the vibrations of their species that it's just background noise that they block out. And I think that's quite a useful feature. We'll get into Skulk sensors a little bit more, either in this episode or in future, because I'm sure there will be plenty of occasions to deep dive some of this. Outside of that, Joel, how about we talk about some of the stuff that we didn't cover in our Minecraft Live recap last week? Because we spent the entire time, more or less, talking about the Caves and Cliffs update, but there was a lot of stuff besides that.
The first of which is the mob vote. We touched on it very briefly. I think the Glow Squid got a side mention at one point. But the Moo Bloom, fell behind the first vote with 837,000 people voting. The results of the first vote were Glow Squid 36.9%, Iceologer 34.8%, and the Moo Bloom was at 28%, losing out. The final vote came down to the Iceologer and the Glow Squid with 740,000 people voting, notably less than the first vote. And the Glow Squid rose to the top with 52% of the vote between the two, Iceologer and Glow Squid. And we'll talk about the Glow Squid a little bit later in this episode. In Minecraft Dungeons, we have cross-play between Windows, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PS4 coming in November 2020. I thought it was December, but it could be November. Presumably through the Microsoft account in the same way that Minecraft Bedrock Edition currently allows. The DLC for Minecraft Dungeons is going to be called Howling Peaks. And in a Windows Central article, we have a little bit more information about that. The new mountains regions, which use wind for various mechanics as an obstacle for puzzle solving and for transport. Ravagers are introduced as enemies alongside a new Ilger mob called Wind Callers, which use wind-based attacks. A new golem-like mob, possibly a boss, is seen in the title art. This was, I think, from our show notes from last week. I believe from the Minecraft.net article that is a summary of Minecraft Live. The Tempest Golem is the name of the boss in that fight. Howling Peaks will also be our first experience of goats, since it should be released before the end of 2020, and I'm pretty sure that it's coming in December, as per the article. The free update, all players get access to an Apocalypse Plus setting, which allows the game to scale difficulty up beyond what we currently have. I think you're crazy. A set of 20 new difficulties available beyond the current peak. The level cap on player equipment will rise with the increased difficulty. And of course, future DLC. A montage of clips from the future updates showed Minecraft Dungeons levels themed around Nether, oceans, and the end.
Exciting times. I think I touched on this briefly last week, but one of the other things on Minecraft Live was the announcement trailer for Steve and Alex being added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the popular Nintendo Switch crossover fighting game. So there are a couple of videos for this. There was an initial announcement trailer, and then we got a Minecraft.net article linked in it as well. And there was also a really detailed breakdown by the developer of the game, Mr. Sakurai, who kind of broke down all of the different moves, because in the Smash community, I expect this is pretty important for players to understand how these different characters are going to play and how they're going to be able to counter certain fighting strategies from other characters. So, Minecraft characters and mechanics have now been added to Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. An announcement trailer went live on October 1st. It caused a temporary Twitter outage as fans shared excitement for Steve and Alex being added as fighters. It genuinely did break Twitter for a second there, which was pretty fun. And in a follow-up presentation before Minecraft Live, Sakurai Masahiro gave a pre-recorded explanation of how the new fighters would work and how many of the game's battle arenas have been redesigned to incorporate new mechanics like mining for resources and placing blocks. Smash Bros. Ultimate supports up to 8 players, so Steve and Alex have 3 alternate character skins, which will probably look familiar to console players. And there are zombie and Enderman variants for Player 7 and Player 8 to fill out the roster. Smash Bros. Also has a group of characters called Mii Fighters, which can be reskinned in various ways, and those now have Minecraft skins based on the Creeper, the Pig, and a suit of diamond armor, which looks pretty funny when it is kind of disembodied like that. Last but not least, we have a brief note here about Minecraft The Mountain, which was also announced at Minecraft Live. This is a follow-up novel to Minecraft The Island from the same author, Max Brooks, and it's available for pre-order, I think, now, but it's going to be published in early 2021.
These Minecraft novels always pass me by.
Yeah. I think it is understandable, really, because I don't think as adults we're necessarily the target demographic. I've been reading a bit of Minecraft The Island because I was sent a copy along with some of the other pre-Minecraft Live goodies that the Minecraft team sent me, and yeah, it's very much like a kind of teen, like an early teen book,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of it is going to resonate with Minecraft players who just enjoy people reacting to the early game experience. You know, if you've ever watched like somebody playing Minecraft for the first time, it feels very much like a novelization of that, and people kind of figuring out how the rules of this new world work. And it's very strange because it's all told in first person, and some of the ways that he describes game mechanics, like opening your inventory, have to be related to the actual experiences of a human being, which is very odd. And I've only read the first few chapters or so, and yeah, it's not the kind of thing that I could really get super stuck into. Like it's fairly light as far as like adult reading goes, but I think for kids who are into Minecraft and parents who are looking to get their kids reading instead of
Hmm.
spending all of their time on screens actually playing Minecraft, then I think it's a really good thing, because I think it'll be a very accessible book for kids who want a Minecraft experience without being in front of it and controlling it themselves.
And please feel free to correct me, listeners, at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. But I would think that a Minecraft comic would be up there because of how visual Minecraft is. You know, like with all the stuff that goes on. I'm surprised there's not like a Minecraft comic. But I'm wondering if maybe it's just that it's just a pain in the butt to draw
I
with all the
think
hard edges.
I think in the early days of the show, we did cover a Minecraft graphic novel that came out a while ago, but I don't recall exactly what the details are of that, or if it ever got continued in any form. So maybe one worth
Yeah.
checking out if you're into, yeah, more of the graphic novel style of stuff.
For me, in terms of the news coming in from Caves and Cliffs from the developers, I like that we can now confirm that the copper blocks are going to be something you can control.
Yeah.
Smart. That
Mm-hmm.
makes a lot of sense, especially if it's something that you can pause somehow, like creating some game mechanics. And this is me speculating, but if it still has to be aged naturally outside, then you have to like watch it like a crop, you know.
Yeah.
And once it gets to the stage that you want it, at that point you then have to do something to it, or somehow, you know, however, whatever mechanic they want you to implement to keep it that way, you'd have to time it right. So you'd have to remember to go back before your copper turns all green if you don't want it green, if you want it some point in between.
And depending
um,
on what time window they decide on that, you might have quite a decent amount of time to do that. But
mm,
considering that several days and nights are going to pass on multiplayer servers, if you leave your copper lying around and you don't make sure it's like paused in whatever state it is, you could come back to it looking completely different, the next
yeah,
time you log
that's
into the
true.
server. If people are loading the chunks that you're in or whatever, then yeah, it could be very different.
I really enjoy the high res look at the copper texture that was shared by Lady Agnes, and something that I did not pick up from the Minecraft live footage because they were mostly showing it in roofs in those images, is that it's not a stone brick texture. We thought it looked a lot like purple bricks with the the 2x2 cross on it, but it's vertical. It's a vertical 50-50 split along the block.
Yeah.
And when it's mostly stairs, it looks like squares, but it's not. They're two rectangles side by side,
It's
and
sort
that
of
is
like a smooth stone double slab, but on its side.
yeah, turned sideways.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's gonna look cool. We still haven't seen it, but I want to see what 6 or 8 of these look stacked together and then horizontal in a wall, like because that could add for people that are looking for things that work better in industrial builds or futuristic builds. Having a vertical texture like that is going to help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I've already seen some people very excited about incorporating copper into steampunk themed sort of Victorian interiors and stuff like that. So it may be that I think you could honestly make a really nice gradient starting with like the full copper block at the bottom and then having it almost like
Yeah.
gradient itself up into the more tarnished version towards the top. I think that could look very striking as like a feature wall of an interior. And yeah, my builder brain just gets fired off on all cylinders whenever I look at copper now. And depending on whether the textures remain or vary a little bit, it will be a pretty interesting time to see where all of that goes.
The other thing that I was curious about, and this just popped in my head now, was with the bug fixes and stuff that might be coming with 116.4. I mean, all good. Always good to have more bug fixes. And I'm kind of wondering, like, what would you think if they had more 1.16 updates between now and 117 because of how far away 117 is? uh, if they had more small bug fixes, no features, just bugs. Like, do you think that would be a good way to keep, updating the game, or would you think like you're going to be happy with one last round of bug fixes, hopefully soon, and then we have another 6 months of the game as it is without any changes?
I haven't updated past 1.16.2 still because the only bug
Right.
fix in 1.16.3 was related to baby piglins duplicating items, which is not something I've ever seen happen and not something I need to worry about in a single player world. So unless the bug fix is particularly problematic for me and I just think, yeah, I need to make sure that that doesn't happen. If it's something more serious like a crash or something like that, then yeah, I want to try and eliminate stuff like that. But realistically, I'm not that fussed about bug fixes at this point. 1.16.2 has been fairly stable for me. Haven't really
Mm-hmm.
had any kind of issues with it. And as long as they aren't like major feature tweaks that I feel like I should cover for my tutorial series or anything, I don't see needing to update that much. So I think it's obviously fine if they want to keep improving the game for people, but if that comes at the cost of the development of 1.17, then obviously it's not the greatest thing. But I
Right.
don't think it will be. I think at this point they have a large enough team that people can divert resources to different areas and not slow down production of something else. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think it's fine if they want to keep improving bugs here and there, especially as more bugs come to light with more people getting further and further into the Nether update. But sooner or later, I expect some of the bugs will just be coming up as a result of new features they're trying to implement in 1.17. So a lot of it is going to be about playtesting that and fixing whatever comes up there.
Yeah, that's true. I'm hoping that they do like for me it's more about keeping an eye on what kind of stability and or performance improvement bugs are fixed because that's where I'm having the most issue. But yeah, because I can't think of anything that's like a player feature bug or something that's supposed to work that isn't working. I can't. Well, although I mean, like you were talking about that shulker box netherite thing that Slice Live mentioned, like that would be a neat thing if they had happened to fix that. Um, I I I think it's really cool how early the devs are already asking for feedback, like how
Yeah.
long it takes for the oxidation state of copper to change and stuff like that. I think it's fantastic that even though there's this like kind of heavy sigh when you realize how far away the Caves and Cliffs update is, but then there's also this opportunity to have slow, steady, and iteration on feedback from players that are excited about the update and how some things that the course of this might change. Mojang might be setting out to do it one way and then realize, oh, we got a lot of negative feedback on that. Let's steer it in a different direction. And ultimately, I think with this kind of development, with Mojang being such a unique developer with so much feedback coming from players on a version of the game that is currently being developed, that I think it'll end up being an even better update in the end.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's gonna be a way to sustain the hype for it as well before we actually get hold of snapshots, which I'm honestly expecting aren't going to come until next year. It's going to be
Agree. Yeah.
it's going to be nice for the community to have feedback before we even have hands-on experience of some of these features. And I expect the suggestions subreddit is getting lit up right now with various people suggesting, for a start, what the glow squid could do, and that's something we're probably going to spin into the main discussion because we got a really great email about that a little bit later. But yeah, I expect that this is going to be a really interesting time for the community and for the developers, just seeing what resonates with people after the announcement of the update and seeing what things really need a bit of an overhaul or deeper consideration, or what the community thinks about some of these features is going to be the kind of key point before they actually get handed out to players to test. And that in itself is going to be an exciting experience. Like I said, we're going to talk about the glow squid a little bit later, but I wanted to touch on the Skulk sensor stuff as well, because we've actually seen a couple of YouTube folks and a couple of modders get into Skulk sensors already, right? I think you watched Mumbo's video on this, and
I did. This is what I caught over breakfast this morning. I was pretty much offline yesterday with a family holiday, so
yeah.
I just didn't see anything until this morning, and I was like, oh wow, that's really cool. And Mumbo is the kind of Redstone YouTuber that I would very much like to see get his hands on something
Yes.
like this. So when Opposec, I believe, is the YouTuber that made the mod. gave Mumbo a preview version, and Mumbo made a video about it. I'm just like, all right, well, if this is going to operate as close to what we saw in the videos as they can muster with the information that OPSEC has, I'm definitely wanting to see Mumbo mess around with it. And he got really excited, which is always very funny in his videos. They're always very entertaining. But some of the stuff that he was making and how he was approaching how it worked and what did and didn't work and happy accidents that would happen, stuff like that, was really, really cool.
Yeah, I watched a similar video by Logical Geek Boy, friend of ours, friend of the show, who's got a much more... I haven't really watched Mumbo's video, so he might go into this, but it's a fairly analytical video, just kind of showing the range of stuff, and he's already got some really interesting ideas when it comes to improving the range, which I believe was limited to 5 blocks just based on what we saw in the trailers. People, the Skulk sensors reacting to a player being in the vicinity. It was only happening within a certain radius, and I presume that's what the mod maker has gone on. But then Logical Geek Boy pointed out that you can create a slightly broader range for it if you put a passive mob like a pig next to the Skulk sensor so that it activates it by making sound, and then mobs don't make sound if the player is more than 16 blocks away. So it won't detect you immediately, but once you get into within a 16 block range, the pig can start to make noise, and that can activate the Skulk sensor. So you've actually effectively tripled the range at which these things can hear you being there. And there's some really, really interesting stuff that I hadn't even considered about these Skulk sensors, but when technical Minecrafters get their hands on it, it's just something else watching those folks work. So yeah, links to both Mumbo and Logical Geek Boy's videos will be in the show notes. Highly recommend checking them both out.
One of the things that Mumbo said that I thought was really interesting was making it something that a comparator could read in terms of signal strength. So increase the sound sensitivity to 15 blocks, much like the 15 blocks of a redstone power source. And the closer you are to the Skulk sensor, the heavier the redstone output would be.
Yeah, effectively, like the louder the louder the vibrations are that it detects, then
the higher the signal. Yeah,
it certainly makes a lot of sense. And they seem to be calculating it based on the travel distance of particles, which Logical Geek Boy also pointed out. Those particles take a certain amount of time to travel, so that in itself implements a kind of delay. So it's not always going to be instant that you find a Skulk sensor and it immediately lights up. Like the thing takes like a second or two to actually get to the sensor and trigger it. So you're not going to be able to have sort of instantaneous effects happening in the same way that you do with, one tick pulses and things like that. It's going to work a little bit differently. So that in itself is exciting, the fact that there's more timing issues to work around and play with. Outside of the Skulk sensor, modders have also been quite hard at work trying to reproduce some of the other features that were showcased, like the Warden and axolotls and stuff like that. System Z, who is a guy I've had a loose correspondence with for a little while, has been working with a mod team to reproduce a few different mobs on his channel and kind of test out the game mechanics for the first time. And he had a video showcasing the Warden in which he died a lot, and it's kind of fun to see what it would look like. Not quite implemented exactly the way Mojang did it with the certain, movement stuff, and we're still not entirely certain what its AI behaves like, but based on the evidence we got in the trailers, they've been able to reproduce it to the best of their ability, and it's looking really interesting. It's kind of fun seeing that in its environment and how scary it is to fight it up close, and it seems like a fun way of testing this stuff out before we even get hold of snapshots.
I neglected to put this in the show notes, but I did catch the Exumavoid video where he went over some of the tweets and things from the week. And one of the things that he posted was a size comparison from the Warden to an Iron Golem. And the Iron Golem was like a half a head shorter and about a block narrower. Like the Warden is a big model.
Yes. Yeah, and it remains to be seen if that's got as big a hitbox as well. I can imagine there being some pretty easy ways to get around it by digging into the wall. And if it's only a certain height and a certain width, then yeah, you're definitely going to be able to cheese it pretty easily. But it's definitely an imposing mob, and when you get it up close, yeah, it's pretty wild. It's going to be an interesting time to actually see how it ends up in the game at this stage and what things people have overlooked or we just haven't seen about how Mojang plans to implement this stuff. Before we move on to emails, though, let's talk about Minecraft Dungeons DLC, because obviously this is something that interests me. Big fan of Minecraft Dungeons. I'm really happy that they're implementing crossplay because people have been asking for that since launch, because it was available on so many different platforms. And people are, I think, used to crossplay because you can crossplay with Bedrock Edition now across basically any platform that it's available on. We also, I think, didn't quite touch on this, but if you've got the Xbox version of Minecraft Dungeons, or if you have Xbox, whatever the Game Pass thing is, that's xCloud, is that what the service is called? You could also play on mobile as well. So even though it says crossplay between Windows, Xbox One, Nintendo Switch, and PS4, I presume xCloud is included in that under either Windows or Xbox. So you've got lots of different ways that you can play Minecraft Dungeons with somebody. And Howling Peaks DLC looks cool. What are your first impressions of that?
You play more dungeons than I do, and not for me disliking the game. It's a matter of time and what one other game I have to bring into my rotation. And I think it looks really fun. One of the things that I liked about Minecraft Dungeons that I did play was any level that had a lot of depth of field. So while the dungeons were cool, I found them cooler when they had deep pits with fog and, the redstone mines having these deep chasms that you're walking by. And
yeah.
I can't remember what the name of the level was where you were the up in the sky, the Arch-Illager's castle. I can't remember what the name of that was.
Obsidian Pinnacle, I think, but yeah.
Thank you. Yes. Yeah. So stuff like that where just you really felt like you're in a vast space as opposed to in a smaller level, and it looks like most of the outside levels that we saw featured in Minecraft Live for the Howling Peaks DLC is like that, and I think it adds a lot of depth to the level from a visual standpoint, which I think is really appealing. And I think the wind and blowing you around and nearly knocking you off cliffs, and whether or not the goat can knock you off cliffs, stuff like that. It just looks like a lot of fun. The only thing that I find whenever I see these trailers for Minecraft Dungeons, because I'm not currently playing it, I'm currently spending a lot of time in Minecraft. I do kind of feel like I get spoiled when I play Minecraft Dungeons, and I go back to regular Minecraft, and it's like, oh right, it doesn't look like Minecraft Dungeons.
Yeah. You gotta have ray tracing, lighting, kind of bouncing off the walls and stuff at that point, which is not exactly freely available right now. But I like the way Howling Peaks is designed. It's obviously got a different aesthetic, and like Pumpkin Pastures, you're starting to see like different leaf colors and grass colors that aren't even in vanilla Minecraft. They've got a very red kind of look to everything, instead of going with a sort of pale minty blue that you normally find in mountain biomes in vanilla Minecraft. So they're taking a pretty strong aesthetic departure from Minecraft like generation, which is quite fun. It's good to see a little bit more color injected in here and there. And I agree with you that like having a sense of verticality, I think it's especially important because for a start, it's a game where you can roll into pits very easily, and you can throw other enemies into pits very easily, which is definitely something I've done once or twice. So I think that's kind of an important mechanic to have that sense of depth in the world. But also, for a game where you can't really jump, you can kind of roll to things, and occasionally you get like a somersault move that briefly allows you to jump, but it's not a game where jumping is a key mechanic in the same way that Minecraft is. You've got to structure the levels in a very clever way so that it feels like you are climbing without really going up a block by jumping, Mm-hmm. So I think what they've done with the level design seems to fit with their existing like quality when it comes to the verticality of these levels and showing you progressing up a peak like that.
And not to take anything away from Howling Peaks, but I was really curious about the Nether, the end, and the water level. Like that all just looked really cool.
Yeah, in the brief look we got at the water level, you can see instead of rolling between platforms, the player kind of performs like the Riptide Trident, the sort of spiraling dive sort of motion, which is quite interesting because they're clearly thinking about the animations and how the player is going to interact in that environment. I wonder if you're going to be slowed down at all by the fact that you've got water all around you, or if it's still going to play at the same pace. I would presume it's still going to be roughly the same, because slowing things down might get a little bit tiresome for players. But I mean, yeah, you've got the ocean, you've got the Nether, you've got the end. Those are all very, very strong themes. I am kind of wondering if we're going to get anything in Minecraft Dungeons past the end. It sort of feels like thematically a good point to leave it. And I assume they're not planning on making DLC levels for it forever. The game's been successful enough, but I don't know if, unless it was an absolute smash hit, it would justify them developing it in perpetuity in the way that they do with the core Minecraft game. So I think the end seems like a good place to leave it. I also wonder if there's going to be another DLC season pass and how many of these upcoming DLCs it's going to cover, because the ones that were announced at launch were Jungle Awakens and Creeping Winter. That was one Hero Edition DLC pass. Now they've effectively announced one and hinted at 3 others. So we've got 4 DLC coming. Are those going to be split up into chunks of 2 again, or is that going to be, more DLC bundled together in a single package? Yeah, it does seem like they are coming out in December, so ignore what it said in the show notes earlier about November. Apocalypse Plus seems fun, and I know you were just kind of like, no, why? But
and that was kind of like wink, wink. I just don't have enough practice with the game to be that good at it. So
for sure, yeah, and
yeah.
And at this point, I think a lot of players have hit end game and are like, well, that's all the game really has to offer for me. So it seems like they're planning on adding a scaling end game similar to the kind of experience people have had with Diablo, or right now I'm playing the Supergiant games Hades. That's really good and has a bunch of stuff that you can throw in after you've beaten the game a couple of times that makes it harder for you, so that the power creep you experience with all of your own weapons and abilities is counterbalanced by, okay, well now you can make the game a little bit tougher. And they didn't really go into what the difficulty levels of Apocalypse Plus were going to change about the game, but if it's anything like the additions they've made in Daily Trials, where you end up with more enchanted mobs, or mobs have a faster movement speed and they just start to behave in more unpredictable ways, that's what's going to introduce more difficulty to it, I think, if they're sticking with established mechanics anyway. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. And in theory, by the time we get another 4 chunks of DLC, that's like 12 additional levels, all of which are also going to have Apocalypse Plus. Right now, I think there are 22 levels if you include all of the DLC, so by the end of it, we're going to look down the barrel of maybe 34 or 35 levels in this game as a full experience. So that's definitely, I think, looking at... A lot of people have the question, like, is it value for money? And I really think by the end of this, it's going to be a really well-built-out, fully fledged game by the time all of the DLC is released.
Oh, and I think it's worth the money now. So adding stuff to it, I think just it adds that your dollar just stretches farther and farther. It's not just a one and done. I think that, when you add multiplayer in, when you add these extra DLCs, when you add the extra difficulties, the daily trials, is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot to do. If you're really into dungeons, there's a lot to do without being, I think, too, not to say bored, but like you're not going to hit a real heavy wall, I don't think.
Yeah.
I think there's enough randomness in the game that those experiences, especially with the daily challenges rotating, like I think there's going to be enough there for people for a while.
I think the one thing it suffers from in that respect is a direct comparison to Minecraft, which is potentially the best value for money game ever, considering the amount of time I've spent on it. Anyway, let's move on to talk about some emails though, because we've got a couple coming in here. One of which is actually from a game developer at Mojang. We had an email from Felix Jones, who works on the Java edition of the game, in response to a previous discussion we had about PSVR. And this subject is VR thoughts, and it's in reply to the Spawn Chunks 108 for anybody who wants to go back and listen to that for context. And Felix says, for me personally, the compelling reason to try Minecraft in VR is that it gives you a sense of scale and perspective that makes you appreciate even the most mundane builds. I am yet to try Bedrock VR, but back in the day I played Java Edition VR mods, Minecraft, as a pun on the Oculus Rift, with the old Oculus Dev Kit 2. I used to spend hours flying around a Zoom Avoids community plot world server just watching other people build and talking to them about how grand and fantastic their creations are. Walking around a Minecraft castle or a cathedral is just breathtaking. It's kind of humbling in a way. Suddenly this world that you thought you had so much personal attachment to is now actually surrounding you, and you have a much stronger personal attachment to it. The 2D experience suddenly falls away into a flat world you're staring at through a screen. That's my experience at a rather high level. Felix Xylephian. Thank you so much for that email, and again, great to hear from a developer, but also somebody who seems to have had extensive experience with VR and Minecraft. And this kind of reminded me actually of playing Minecraft Earth, because even that way, looking at it through the lens of my phone, when you placed a full-size structure in a world, it was kind of striking how large everything looked if you're looking at them from the perspective of you as a human being rather than a player on the screen. And you can't really go up or down a block in real life in the same way that you can as a player, so it's a lot harder to climb a mountain and look at your builds from a distance in augmented reality, unless you have some easily accessible outdoor stairs. Anyway, so yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, that it sort of changes your perspective, quite literally, on how big everything feels when it's to your scale.
And that's where I wonder where VR for me would be off-putting or slightly weird. And that is that I got a really good sense of immersion and scale when I first started playing Minecraft, because I started playing on my Mac, which is a 27-inch iMac. And, I mean, I don't sit like on top of it, but it's fairly close as far as, because of the way that it's set up on my desk. And I had those feelings of like the pit of your stomach dropping when you fell off of a high build when I was first learning to play Minecraft. Like it really did give you that, like, I've hit terminal velocity before I hit the water sort of feeling, to the point where I used to add jumps like that on purpose into my builds so that I'd have that fun of jumping off of something.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing that I remember we were talking about earlier this year was how the player in Minecraft actually moves faster than the average person would walk.
Yeah.
And how that helps with the idea that these blocks are 1 meter by 1 meter. And so when you're walking through a doorway that's a meter thick, it doesn't feel like you're walking through something that's 3 foot thick, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I'm wondering, like, when you get into VR and you realize, because if anybody's ever tried to build a Minecraft block in real life and measure it as 1 meter by 1 meter, it is not a small thing. Like,
Nope.
The fact that we can hold one of these in one hand and toss it around in the game, it's a really odd experience. And I think between that and the POV settings in the game, for anybody that takes any screenshots and takes their POV down to like 50 or 55 compared to the default, which is 70, you already feel very close to everything. Like, it feels a little uncomfortable. And I kind of wonder whether in VR, if in that first person on the ground feeling, some things just start to feel really large. Like when the smallest tree is a really large tree, when bamboo is as big around as your leg,
Yeah.
I'm wondering what that experience might be. But I think that's a really cool point to make, in that, because of that flat kind of like panel, you don't have that sense of immersion. And I do really think that Minecraft VR for me would be more of an experience. I don't know that I would want to play it like all the time, but I think it would be really cool. You imagine some of these builds by like, it's Elysium Fire? Is that?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Like they built some immaculate stuff, and to walk through one of their like, Italian towns or their cyberpunk thing in VR would just be bananas, especially if you combine VR down the line with, ray tracing.
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was talking about, I think, in the previous episode, was how much the future of Minecraft might end up being in VR with RTX, and seeing, ray tracing graphics and the realism that brings, combined with the realism of actually standing in your own Minecraft world. And it sort of brings me back again to reading about the narrator's experience in Minecraft the Island, and realizing, there's a certain amount of existential horror when they realize the world around them is entirely made of blocks, because it's sort of implied that they have somehow ended up there from our world, and all of the sort of memory they have of what things should be like is suddenly everything is made of cubes. And they hopefully that isn't a side effect of playing Minecraft in VR for too long, is that you're like, wait a second, the world is entirely made of blocks. And there's definitely some different perspective, no pun intended, to be found from playing Minecraft in VR.
I noticed that that Felix did not mention what it feels like to be confronted with a 9 foot 10-inch Enderman.
Yes. Yeah, that's another consideration, is how tall. And Alistair in our live chat was wondering how tall the warden would be in real life if Steve was 2 meters. I'm thinking, yep, that's not something I ever want to encounter in VR. That's like playing. Now we are definitely playing a horror game.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks again for the email, Felix. Next email comes from Raymond D or Pincho Kun 13. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Glow Squids and the Warden. Speaking of the Warden. Hello, Joel and Jonny. Thank you for covering the recent Minecraft Live. I was wondering if you were surprised by the vote for the Glow Squid, and if that could be an indication of classic Minecraft players wanting to more entities that enrich the world environments versus another hostile mob. FYI, my vote was for the Glow Squid as well for this reason. Having said that, I'm very excited for the Warden as much as you both are, but I'm hoping that there will be some kind of incentive to keep it alive. For example, maybe there is a mechanic where the Warden interacts with Skulks for their growth. The addition of wool socks could be a funny addition that helps the player sneak around the Warden, a compromise to your armor, similar to when wearing elytra and trade for a chestplate. Thanks again for your great podcast, and looking forward to the next one. And there's an included, I guess, concept of wool socks, which I found the image is quite funny. We'll have that included in the show notes as well. I'll say I'm not surprised that the Glow Squid won. Maybe a little surprised that the Moo Bloom didn't. Not that I wanted it to win, but I kind of felt that the way that they had set things up, it was basically going to be whatever was the cutest was probably going to run away with it. So in a way, I guess I'm relieved that it's the Glow Squid and not the Moo Bloom, knowing that I, along with you, Jonny, were voting for the Iceologer against the tide as it was happening.
Yeah.
I think people just wanted something shiny. I think that that's maybe the demographic that vote for these things, or that the vote appeals to. I would be surprised, though, that the people that did vote for the Glow Squid are, if they're not crossing their fingers for something a little bit extra.
Yes,
rather than
definitely.
having it just be a squid. And we'll get into this in a little bit. If they don't get it, I am anticipating that there will also be a loud complaint against the Glow Squid from the people who voted for it. So
Yeah.
I think that there is an opportunity, I think, and it's good that, as we mentioned already, Mojang is taking a lot of feedback from the community. So when they eventually ask for feedback on the Glow Squid, I hope everybody's constructive and has some cool ideas, and hopefully they'll listen and have it not just be, a squid. I think the Warden is a bit too hostile to be something that you want to keep around. I think that's just going to be crazy dangerous, and as hard as it hits, I don't think that would be something that would be very easy to manage for having it grow Skulk blocks faster. However, I like the idea of growing Skulk blocks faster, not just collecting it and moving it somewhere. I think you mentioned last episode that you thought that maybe it could be something that requires dark to grow as opposed to requiring light to grow.
Mm-hmm.
We've mentioned that the Skulk blocks, they sort of look like end colors, very end portal block, very ender pearl, very, that kind of, well, I guess, yeah, ender pearls. Default color for ender pearls is
You have purple ender pearls, don't
I've got
you?
purple
So,
ender
yeah.
pearls, so I had to do a double check on my brain.
Yeah.
So the end stuff is typically kind of greenish. So having maybe if you moved Skulk blocks to the end, they grow faster. That would be cool. They would certainly match things for once in the end. And if maybe even ender pearls could somehow be, I don't know, composted, or like anything that you could, if you could use ender pearls for fertilizer for Skulk blocks, I think that would be it'd be a neat idea. And it would be a use for the 1,675,903 ender pearls I currently have on the server. So
Yes, definitely.
like it might be fun in that way.
You can kind of like
but
melt them down or something. Yeah.
Yeah, like there's some potential for things that exist in Minecraft, do not require the devs to add a new item, but add a new feature or new use for an existing item, to then even reach into items that they know are not used by players that much and reintroduce them.
Yeah. No, I think it's a good way of developing stuff that has previously, if not been underdeveloped, then has traditionally occupied a certain space in player consciousness, and that's keeps it fresh if you end up throwing some new uses into old items. The example I always come back to is how the campfire was later implemented as a way to smoke out beehives when you needed to move those around. And the campfire was previously fairly functional in itself as a way to cook food and produce smoke and that kind of stuff, but it just adds to the value of things that have been added into the game previously. Yeah, I have a couple of ideas going on with the Warden in particular, wondering if maybe, and this is like a slightly gross angle on it, but what if the Skulk sensors are cultivated by the Warden in a sense in that they're like shed parts of the Warden, because they kind of look like the top of the Warden's head, and so maybe if it sheds its skin like a snake and just like leaves these blocks lying around, and that's how you end up farming Skulk sensors instead of just finding them or having them grow naturally. So maybe that's a reason to keep the Warden alive. I don't know. I'm definitely going to be trying to keep the Warden alive myself anyway, because I just like him. But aside from that,
that would be a neat idea. Like if the antlers for the Warden are essentially seeds, and he's less of a mob and more of a plant monster, like a swamp thing.
Yeah. A swamp thing is definitely the vibe I get. A shambling mound, as he is right now. But yeah, I do like the addition of wool socks. I did think it would be good to have, if not like a new type of armor, then a decent armor enchantment that could maybe muffle your footsteps around the Warden if it's going to attack you when it hears you. And I do kind of agree that with what you were saying about the Skulk stuff being kind of having an affinity of sorts with the End. I think it also comes down to the mechanics we're used to from mobs in the End. If you think about the way Endermen behave, they don't like you to look at them, and then the Warden is something that doesn't want you around if you're making noise. And so I think, yeah, that there's room in the End for mechanics to branch out into like weird and interesting forms of physics, it feels like. So I feel like the Skulk stuff does have that sort of affinity with the End, even if it isn't found there, or even if the End doesn't really have much in the way of, additional mechanics to add to it. As far as the glow squid stuff goes, and if we were surprised by the vote for the glow squid, I was surprised. Like you, Joel, I called it for the Moo Bloom before we started the show, and then the Moo Bloom was the first to go. But I do kind of agree with people's reactions to the Iceologer, and I feel like the Iceologer was the strongest mob in that it had both the strongest arguments against it and the strongest arguments for it. Being that it was the one we knew the most about, but was also going to be another hostile mob experience like the Phantom, which, previously people voted for, but then has ended up being a bit more of a controversial figure. We won't say hated, but it's definitely inconvenienced a lot of players. And then, people not wanting a repeat of something like that where they add something to the game that they later end up regretting, but also it being a mob that spawns in mountain biomes and people being more interested in seeking out mountain biomes, but being put off by the fact that something hostile would start spawning there. So I feel like the arguments for and against the Iceologer were pretty balanced, and as for the arguments for and against the glow squid, I really feel like the argument against it was we don't really know what this does, and from the trailer, it doesn't really do all that much. And the arguments for it are, well, this is now a blank canvas. This is something that, as players, we can project our own wishes on and then see what Mojang picks up on and see what they're interested in implementing. So that's what we're going to talk about for our main discussion this week. Our thoughts and feelings on the glow squid at present, predictions for how it could be made into a mob that, as survival players, we would find good and useful, and a little bit more feedback on that.
So as it stands right now, I'm pretty meh on the glow squid.
I mean, same, yeah.
But it has potential, but we're also dealing with the existing track record of zombie variants like Drowned, which, while funny, don't really add much to the game. I mean, they have the tridents, but like they don't operate much different than a regular zombie in terms of, they didn't add a mer person, like they didn't add something with a fishtail or anything really unique. They just kind of took another zombie variant. But I think maybe other things like husks and things like that are another good example. I also, and this is, personal, but I don't really find the villager variants all that enticing. They've got different hats and stuff, but it doesn't really blow my mind. The little animated spot suggests that the glow squid could entrance the player with maybe mobility slow or freeze, and that could add a slight danger to oceans, similar to how magma block bubble columns pull players down and disrupt your boat travel. It's not hard to deal with once you know it's there, but for some people that are early to the game and new to Minecraft, it actually is like kind of not disorienting, but certainly off-putting when you're traveling along a boat and all of a sudden you're out of it and you're being pulled underwater. Like, that's not a good feeling when you've got nothing but like the scraps of leather armor that you've picked up from chests in your first, few nights in the game. So I think that having something like that could add a little bit of not something that attacks you, but something that provides an environmental hazard that you then
Yeah.
have to either avoid or deal with and expect, that kind of thing. So not like Guardians where they will hone in on you and physically attack you, but just a zone near a glow squid where, like, if you get close, there could be something like that. Um, so yeah, there's not a whole lot to it. They never showed anything from any of these mobs outside of the uh, Moo Bloom, which is already in Minecraft Earth, in terms of what it might look like in the game. So yeah, I don't know really what else to expect other than just another squid.
Yeah, I'm kind of indifferent to the glow squid right now. But I think there are many ways that it could be worth seeking out once the update arrives, and it really depends on any ideas Mojang had for it internally that they were keeping a secret for the mob vote itself so as not to influence people in one way or the other, or what the community suggests that Mojang thinks is worth running with. I think it's worth noting that they have confirmed through various places. I'm afraid I don't have sources for this, so sorry for the lack of sources here. They don't want the squid to emit light itself as it roams around in the world, because dynamic lighting is not a feature of vanilla Minecraft, even though some folks may be familiar with it from Optifine. I would assume that is largely because they don't want to deal with lighting either affecting mob spawning or confusing players who think it did affect mob spawning, right? So, like, in dynamic lighting with Optifine, if you throw a torch on the ground as an item, if you just drop it with Q, it still produces light in an aura around it, but that's not necessarily in-game block light. That is just a cosmetic light that Optifine has added. Same with firing a flaming arrow across a ravine. You will see the light travel with it, but that doesn't then light up the other end of the ravine so stuff doesn't spawn. So I expect Mojang is probably trying to simplify it for players who need to understand that placed light blocks in the world are what blocks mob spawns, and anything else doesn't produce natural light, so you don't get that confusion. They also have said that the bit in the animated trailer about the squid hypnotizing people was kind of being played as a joke. It wasn't planned as a feature. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it can't have an environmental effect, like you said. It could be a brief burst of nausea or something like that, because so far the only other stuff that causes nausea is pufferfish and I guess the effect you get when you're traveling through a nether portal, right? It kind of gives you a little bit of screen wobble for a second, which isn't necessarily hypnosis, explicitly speaking, but could still be an effect that the glow squid could have. There are a bunch of other things that I think it could do, so I'm going to lay out a couple for you here and see what you think. I think the most obvious one is to have it drop something useful, bonus points if that's a light source. One of the kind of maybe further reaching, but in the ideal scenario for me, would be that it either gives you access to some sort of luminous or even like almost black light kind of dye to make something almost like a day glow version of the colors that we already have, or it could change the color of enchantment glow, which is something that I've talked about really wanting in the past cosmetically, and something that's been added by mods like Quark in the past. So if you end up with some sort of glowing thing that you can then apply to any color of dye to get glowing red, and then you apply glowing red to your armor and suddenly it's glowing a red color instead of purple for enchantment, I really like that idea. So if the glow squid was going to do something like that, then 100% on board at that stage. But again, that's purely projection and speculation at this stage. Other things I was thinking it could do as far as being an environmental thing, if it's not going to have a negative effect on players, it could have a net gain for players if it distracted the drowned so that they don't attack you. Maybe the drowned are more drawn to its glow as, like, forgotten sailors or whatever that have zombified and come back to life. If maybe they get distracted by glow squid, and you could either use that as a mechanic to lure them into the center of a farm without having to put a villager underwater, if you could capture a glow squid for that, which might be a challenge in and of itself, or alternatively you could use it to swim towards a glow squid and have the drowned that are following you with tridents be distracted and give yourself a chance to get away.
I like that idea actually. It reminds me of like a Bug's Life. You know, you've got like the little moth, the bug light, where the
Yeah.
little cartoon moth is just like, I can't help it. He's flying towards the light,
Hmm.
almost like an anglerfish. You know, with
Yeah,
the
there's the scene in
bioluminescent stuff.
Finding Nemo where they end up following an anglerfish light for a
Oh
while, and then it
right, yeah,
turns into
yeah.
like a horrifying chase sequence. Yeah, so yeah, like but having that kind of effect on things, like if they want to take the hypnosis thing to a slightly different angle, they could have it maybe have a little bit of benefit to players in the same way that finding stuff like dolphins is of mild benefit to players, and axolotls are going to help you raid ocean monuments. So maybe the glow squid is a team player as well. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, and I think that idea of a glow squid affecting mobs like the drowned could affect maybe drowned farms. You know, like if you wanted to get tridents or whatever, if you had the glow squid constantly pulling drowns toward it, if you were a technical player, there's probably a way to do that. How do you transport squid? Like if we end up liking the glow squid and we want them in an aquarium or something like that, what would be the best way to do it? In a boat, I guess?
Probably yes. Although I think squid still have to stay in water, otherwise they start taking suffocation damage.
Right.
On Bedrock Edition, I believe you can leash them. On Java Edition, you can't. And so
Ah,
the only ways I've seen people transport squid recently has been a very brief minecart trip. And
right.
and then if it goes over land, it has to be back in the water as quickly as possible. Otherwise, it takes too much damage and suffocates.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, they're going to be kind of like a product of their environment, and maybe not something you can move that easily, which is too bad because we know now that um, squid they'll spawn in river biomes and they'll spawn in oceans.
Yeah.
But I guess I mean if you're building something, you could always build something over, build a spawning area over a river biome and then remove them from there and kind of have your own little squid farm. I do that now for ink sacs.
Yeah,
So
I
if
believe in the trailer they said they were going to be in deep oceans
yes,
specifically. So
yeah.
yeah, you're looking at going pretty far out. I don't know if they would spawn in rivers with the rest of the squid, but
Mhm.
um,
But I remember Lady Agnes mentioning, not as a feature, but as that could be a potential, because they were reacting to the glow squid winning the mob vote, saying, well, what about glow squids being found in cave lakes and the caves and
yes,
cliffs
yes,
update,
yes.
kind of cave lakes. So those would either be, I guess, maybe caves under the ocean, or maybe she meant there'd be a specific type of biome where the glow squid could maybe spawn inland, but only in caves
Yeah,
and
if
stuff
they're
like that,
if
which
they're
would
in
make sense.
dripstone caves or something like that, yeah,
Yeah,
that would
yeah.
certainly make sense. And you do really wish that they would just provide ambient light to the area, because
Hmm.
finding your way into a dripstone cave and having the glow from the nearby water being, out there. And I expect that's the kind of thing that modders will put into the game if they feel like it's worth adding. So like, anybody who's still playing with Optifine at that stage is going to find maybe dynamic light comes from the glow squid, and that's going to enhance the experience for them, but it's still not something that's going to be delivered in vanilla.
Hmm.
What about you, Joel? Do you have anything that you think really would make the glow squid a more valuable proposition for you?
Well, if you're going to add something new to the game, I would really want them to make a different model for the glow squid compared to the squid, because from a character design standpoint, I really feel like silhouette tells a lot, especially in video games. And in murky situations in the ocean where you're trying to tell a regular squid from a glow squid, I think just the texture alone, if it's not going to emit any light, is not going to be enough. Or also just a good opportunity to maybe like, well, try to improve the squid model, make it a little bit different, make it bigger, why not make it a different size? It's going to be in the deep ocean. It has room to be a larger model, especially if it's not going to be spawning in rivers where the derpy pathing animation of squids just have them headbutting the shore constantly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't find the squid right now is a appealing Minecraft derpy character. I find that there's something that pulls me out of the game where like I see them underneath my medieval bridge, swimming horizontally into the ground, and I just kind of roll my eyes like, oh, Minecraft.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't help the immersion, where the opposite is true of salmon in rivers and having fish in different biomes. Like it actually adds to the immersion. Like, oh, cool. Like you cross the river, you look down, there's fish swimming around. And so that I find is plenty different. Um, I really feel that they could do something more with the model. I'm kind of crossing my fingers that ambient light, or not ambient light, but emissive light actually does make it into Minecraft natively. Hopefully they give people options to turn it on and off, but like if it's there and possible in the native game, I think that would be an excellent way to go. I think a unique drop is what the glow squid is going to need to make it be something like where people will actually perk up and be like, oh, okay, so like you've added not just a new mob, but something into the game. And like you, I'm hoping that it's got something to do with a light source block, either a new light source block, a new light source material, or something that you could then add to light sources to change them. I don't know what that would mean. Maybe it would make it darker, in the same way that soulfire lanterns and soulfire torches have a lower light level than a regular lantern. Maybe give us something lower still, so it's not going to do anything against mob spawns, but when you want something moody, that would be cool.
Something moody to light up your caves with. Again,
yeah,
if
exactly.
you're gonna have like a little bit of that, like light off the dappled water, kind of like casting light up on the wall, and just have like almost like underfloor lighting coming up from certain areas in that sort of like faint glowy sort of cave way, I think would be really good. If you got a light source that gave off like a light level of 5 or something, I think that'd be perfect for it.
Yeah, exactly. Now, I think that they could also not just add a glow squid. Like if you're going to add the glow squid to the deep oceans, why not add something unique around it and have it feel like less of plopping a new mob into Minecraft, and maybe give it an environment where it makes sense that that's where it lives, in the same way that you've got the crimson forests and the warped forests in the nether, and the things that you find there make sense. Having maybe some bioluminescent plants, or some sort of, even if it changes like particle effects. They've been doing a lot with these particle effects. We saw it in the cave in Cliffs update. We saw a lot of it in the nether update. So if you find a glow squid in the deep ocean, and then there's like, I don't know, maybe phytoplankton or something around it that, Mojang likes to do educational stuff about the environment, having some bioluminescent stuff in the ocean would be very cool. It would look great. And it could provide some education as to what actually is around in the oceans in the real world. So that kind of stuff could add, playability to the game. Imagine if there is some sort of bioluminescent seaweed or kelp that you have to harvest, and then combining that with whatever the squid drops is what gets you the thing that you want from that. So it's not just a matter of another squid farm. You have to do something else. Make a little bit more effort for the player, for that time in, effort in, reward out that they always talk about.
Yeah, definitely.
One of the things that I do want to mention quickly before we move on, and that is Jumbo Sale in our live chat mentioned that glow squids giving night vision when you're nearby them could be kind of cool.
Right.
Underwater. That's I thought that was a neat idea.
Yeah, I think with conduits and stuff, and changing up how the the underwater visibility works, I think they were trying to move away from players using night vision, but it does have that kind of illuminating effect in that it sort of brightens the environment rather than making it possible to see more clearly now. So I think that's actually a pretty decent idea. If it stays implemented the way night vision currently works, then it definitely feels like the environment would be a little brighter. So yeah, a lot of stuff to think about, really. Like the glow squid has hidden depths, I think, and we'll wait and see how many of those depths are uncovered, or whether they all just sink to the bottom. But that is going to be it for this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about the show and links to some of the stuff we talked about today at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and as we said at the top of the show, The Spawn Chunks is proud to be a listener-supported podcast. If you get some value out of the show, consider putting some value back in. You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any level gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat, gets you access to the render distance, and gets us closer to our next goal, which is having a monthly Minecraft audio hangout with our patrons. Every month we just sit down and chat about whatever we've all been doing in Minecraft. We're currently at 214 patrons in the community, which is an increase from last week. And special thanks go out to our content engineers, Cameron Sigelski, Dilkin Seben, General Patton 82, Greener Canuck, JD Williamson, and Yitz for your support on this episode.
One of the other things that you get as a patron of the Spawn Chunks is access to the quarterly hangout. We recorded our third quarterly hangout this year on Saturday, and that is where we give you some behind-the-scenes looks as to what the Spawn Chunks is doing on the charts in terms of downloads and what we're planning for the future, and we take listener feedback and information from the chat as well. So that is up on the Patreon page for patrons only. Spreading the word about the podcast is the easiest way to support the show. It's free. Just tell a friend about it. Say, hey, you should listen to this, and then tell them where they can find it. One of the places you can find the Spawn Chunks is on Twitter and Instagram. You can also email the show at spawnchunkmail@gmail.com. Subscribe for free on iTunes, Android, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music as well now. Leave us a review on the Apple Podcast app. That's the easiest way for strangers to find the podcast. And the RSS feed is linked on the spawnchunks.com. And the Patreon-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Jonny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where I attempt to make sense of this crazy and wonderful game in a series called the Minecraft Survival Guide. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, doing behind-the-scenes work for the Survival Guide series, and I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Twitter and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything I'm doing online, including my illustration and design portfolio, is at joelduggan.com. Links to social media and links to other podcasts I do, like the Citadel Cafe, are there as well. And you can find that at thecitadelcafe.com. This past week, we talked about Enola Holmes' latest movie from Netflix, and it was very good. If you can stomach social media these days, you can find me at Joel Duggan, and of course, Joel Duggan on twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite. Shine on, you crazy glow squid.